Go ahead and start recording. Okay, so let's start at the beginning, and if everybody wouldn't mind stating your name.
Daryl.
AJ.
Danielle.
Vicky.
Jerry.
All right, thank you, everybody. So today, my presentation is about the importance of purified water, especially in historic nations. I don't like to call them third world or anything else like that. But every day, many of us turn on a faucet without even giving it a second thought, expecting and being provided clean water. Yet, for nearly 2 billion people around the world, this is not part of their daily life. Instead, water is a struggle and a danger, and something that a lot of individuals need to walk miles to find. Today, I'd like to talk about why providing clean water is essential and how we can make it possible on a wider scale. So, clean water is the foundation of health. And without it, diseases like cholera, typhoid, and diarrhea spread rapidly and silently. These are illnesses that we barely think about in our society due to stacked history and infrastructure that has been put into place a long time ago to ensure that we had clean water right here at our homes. These illnesses steal the lives of children, especially, and elderly people every single day. So imagine for a second knowing that something as basic as a drink of water could harm your family. That is a fear that I personally would not like to live with. But clean water is not only for survival, it's about opportunity. In many communities, children, especially girls, walk long distances every day to collect water. This daily journey keeps them out of school and robs them of the chances to learn and grow. When a village gains clean water, these children gain an education, they gain time, and they gain a future. Clean water also builds stronger economies. Farmers need safe water to grow crops, and families need it to cook and clean. Businesses depend on it to operate safely, and when communities get access to clean water, they gain the foundation to work, to earn, and to progress. The good news is that clean water is not an impossible dream. We already have the tools and the technology to make it a reality. Unfortunately, it will require investors to be willing to send those resources to these nations without expecting something in return other than the good of mankind and society. So let's talk briefly about ways to clean water. So boiling water. Boiling water was something that when I was traveling, we would do on a regular basis. We'd usually look for spring, which would be categorized by usually a rocky location with a shallow, clear pool of water. You could recognize it as a spring because you would see some of those small grains of sand kind of flowing out of or bouncing out of the ground as the pressure of that water is filling up that small basin. So we would boil that water round the clock for coffee and for stuff to drink when we were out in the woods. This is an effective way to kill bacteria and parasites. However, one thing that I've learned in my classes that I wish I had known back then is that the metals and chemicals in that water can do what we call biomagnification, where as you're boiling the water, the hydrogen and oxygen molecules that make up the water are evaporating and steaming away. but those chemicals and those metals are staying in the water, and they are actually what's the word I'm looking for? They're actually concentrating as more of that water is boiled away. So although that's a good way to kill organics, it's not good for things like metals and chemicals. So the second one is using water filters. I know that at our job, we use a ceramic water filter with a paper membrane to separate out particulates of a certain size. The drawback with this is that it is very expensive. Those filters, although they may look like a piece of paper, have precisely drilled and stamped holes that are smaller than even some viruses and bacteria. And it takes a lot of machinery to drill those holes precisely. One of the other ways of a water filter is sand. Municipal water treatment operations use layered sand to filter out particulates in water, and that is a long-term solution, because once you have that sand in a water filtration reservoir, you can continue to use that for years as long as you're backfeeding periodically to wash those contaminants back out of it. The drawback with that is that it does require a large amount of sand. And the third is charcoal filters. That is the most common household water filter. That's what you get in your Brita and your in the sink water filters. That works well in our society because municipal wastewater has already removed the bacteria and possible organics in that water. However, municipal wastewater does add things like calcium, fluoride, and chlorine to water in order to enhance our water quality. And for some folks, especially those immunocompromised, those over time can cause buildups in the body. Another feature of water purification, or another way of water purification, is chlorinization, which we just talked about. Adding a small and safe amount of chlorine to water can disinfect that water. But again, that does require large amounts of chlorine, especially when you're looking at villages or cities. And it does require precise calculations of that chlorine so that it does not harm that population. The fourth way to clean water would be solar disinfection, where sunlight is used to kill harmful organisms in clear plastic bottles. The drawback for this method is that we're learning more as we use plastic, and studies are showing that keeping water in plastic bottles long term can cause that plastic to microfracture, leaving microplastics in that water, especially as that bottle changes temperature and thus changes size. Municipal water purification uses solar disinfection as well. However, in modern society, they use large UV bulbs in the water treatment process. It is the last step of the water treatment process before it goes into the pipes to head to our homes. The requirement with those systems is that the water has to sit in that UV chamber for enough time for the UV to break the cell walls of those microorganisms. So it does require time. Building wells and boreholes are also an important way to get clean or fresh water to a village. The drawback there is that wells and boreholes are susceptible to in-ground runoff. In our municipal wastewater classes, we learned that even underground, there are natural rivers, not rivers as we think of them with large, fast flowing amounts of water, but rather water that is flowing through less dense pockets of soil over entire states, which provides the water table, which is the level of water underground, um, you know, which is what we would call the saturation zone. So the drawback with those wells and boreholes is that if your house or the spot where the well is downhill from any sort of landfill or dump site, the chemicals will leach into that well or that borehole. In fact, and I know here in Wisconsin and in the United States in general, there are many federal guidelines as to testing of wells periodically, what type of well you can drill, and how that well has to be covered or kept from vermin getting into that well. The second to last option here is the installing community water treatment systems, which can purify large quantities of water for entire villages. Obviously, the drawback here is that installing a large-scale community water treatment system requires significant investment, significant resources. It can purify water for large groups of people for years to come, but that does require investment on the part of organizations. And that investment may not see a return for quite some time, especially if it is impoverished village. And the last here is rainwater harvesting. When I was traveling, I had the opportunity to live with a couple of folks in New Orleans shortly after Katrina. And a couple of these folks had big 500-gallon water buckets or plastic water buckets outside their houses that were linked to their gutters. And these water buckets would be linked to PVCs inside the house with foot pumps next to the kitchen sink. So even though this water was not potable, it was still able to be used to wash dishes, to wash clothing, to flush the toilets using nothing but foot pumps or hand pumps. This mitigated the amount of municipal water that they had to use for daily tasks that don't necessarily require potable water. So these methods are not theories. They are proven, and their solutions have already transformed communities across the globe. When we invest in these systems, we are not just providing water, but we are providing life, dignity, and hope to a lot of these communities. The real question is not whether we can solve the water crisis, but whether we choose to. Providing clean water is not a charity. It is a responsibility that we as our fellow man owe to the rest of our people. A lot of countries have been strip mined by a lot of corporations that that don't have the interest of these communities in mind. And it's time that now that we know better, that we start to do better for our fellow man around the world. We can open doors to education and strengthen those communities from the ground up. And here at the end of the presentation, before we do any questions, I remember that the first time that I recorded this, one of the participants asked specifically why my research had shown that primarily girls are the ones who have to walk and get this water from naturally occurring water sites in a lot of these villages. And after doing my research, I realized that it's because a lot of these are farming or hunting communities. A lot of the sons are out with the fathers, learning to hunt, learning to farm, which, for a lot of these villages requires the women to go and get water, sometimes walking miles, sometimes days. And a lot of times, a lot of the women of the village will go together. That way they can bring back large amounts of water and it wouldn't require them to go back to the water site every single day. So I'll take any questions.
I have a question. It might be a pretty basic one. I was wondering, how effective are wind farms and solar energy for clean water? How much of a good revenue is that? Is it effective? How effective is it against less clean energy sources for something this big?
Gotcha. Yeah. A lot of these countries, when you think about it, a lot of these places also don't have large scale power plants. So solar and wind energy can provide the power that these villages or smaller communities need to power pumps, to which can either move that water uphill if needed or provide pumping through a lot of those filters or even drawing up from a well. I mean, obviously, solar and wind farms would benefit these communities a lot, just in general, yeah, outside of the water purification process. But yeah, those are my first two ideas on that.
Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense.
What concern should I have you're talking about this water's bad and it needs to be purified. What concern should I have then about the food? I mean, I fish, I might eat turtles. What concern should I have about eating from waters that might be contaminated?
Well, that's something that we see even here in Milwaukee, being so close to Lake Michigan. Um, I think it was my second year, we were talking about the effects of mercury in fish in Lake Michigan. And it was just one of the case studies that we looked at, which kind of illustrated to me that anything that you do dump into a water body is going to cause what's called bioaccumulation in a lot of those organisms. Um, Pumping and filtering can not only provide clean water, clean drinking water for a lot of these communities and villages, but it can also allow them to purify the standing groundwater in their own communities, thus relieving a small lake or a village, or not a village, or a river of a lot of those harmful toxins. When you think about it, every animal is going to drink out of a groundwater source. The benefit for a lot of those animals is that they already have the gut microbes to process any of the bacteria or parasites that might be present in that water, something that we don't have anymore. And so like you were saying, when you eat those animals, a lot of those toxins and a lot of those parasites can get into us as well. So, I mean, just filtering and cleaning water sources, especially open top groundwater sources, can improve the quality of game in your area. It can also improve the quality of crops because I know that there are certain metals and certain chemicals that plants do not filter out that do not necessarily harm the plants themselves. Those are things that we can eat that seem completely normal to us, like radon and potatoes. Radon is a naturally occurring form of radiation that, if not monitored in an area where potatoes are grown, can accumulate in those potatoes. And then once those potatoes are cooked, can then affect the human body.
Thank you. You real quickly, you talked about uh, these deprived countries getting clean water. How expensive is it to do that? Is there something simple they can do? I mean, in the United States, we got so many electronics and so many plants and equipment and water purification sites. But you're talking about bringing this to deprived countries. What can they do? I mean, where are they going to get the money from? How expensive is it? Is there something cheap, or what's the deal?
Well, as technology progresses, the options are getting cheaper. Like, let's say 40 years ago, in order to have a water filtering, how did they word it in class? A continuous water filtering tube, for lack of a better word, you would have to have a metal tube, a metal fan. These days, you can have a PVC tube, a plastic fan. These are all modern materials used to make cheaper, lighter components for water filtering operations. I'm glad you brought up modern technology as well, because using let's say parts of Africa as an example, the issue is not that these communities are poor necessarily, because they are rich in resources. And particularly, a lot of these companies are suffering from strip mining that is going on from very, very rich companies, who are then dumping a lot of what we in the industry call detritus, which is a word for just general garbage water, which could be high in lithium from battery mining, or cadmium from cadmium mining for our cell phones, that are then leaching into the water. And this is a direct result of those mining operations, not naturally occurring event, because those metals were locked up in rocks that did not leak into the water table. So in a lot of those communities, investment in the billions has already been made, but it's been made in mining operations and things like that. The money is there, but the will to use that money for something that does not lead to direct profit is not there. So as people are developing cheaper ways to make plastic fans, plastic housing, plastic tubing to run lines for pumps from water sources, the investment cost is getting lower.
Thank you. I just got one final question, and I'll let somebody else get in. It's kind of personal. When I go to the store, there's all different types of water. They got purified water, this kind of water, this kind of water. Am I wasting my money because I'm buying the higher one, or is there a difference, or can I just buy the cheap one and I'll get the same quality?
Well, one thing I'll say is that it's been my experience that in society, you do kind of pay for the name sometimes. But when you think about this from step